Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of DefDave's 1984. I'm your host, DefDave, and on this show, we take a comprehensive chronological tour through every single day of the best year ever. I am convinced that 1984 was the best year in pop culture history, and I hope by the time I'm through with my series that I have convinced you of the same thing. We are back today to talk about, we're staying right here on this weekend. That's jam packed. I've got several episodes that are taking place kind of between January 20th and January 24th. Got a whole bunch going on. We're right here on January 22nd, 1984. Happens to be my 13th birthday, and we have Super Bowl XVIII. And to help me talk about it, let me bring him onto the stage right now. We have Jason Colvin, co-host of the Surely You Can't Be Serious podcast, and Jim Butler, co-host of the Children of the 80s podcast. Gentlemen, welcome back to DefDave's 1984. How are y'all doing?
Good, man. Thanks for having us. This is fun. Love talking old 80s NFL.
I always love being visited by friends here in 1984. I want to know, how did y'all get here? Jason, what was your time travel vehicle of choice where you could come back here and visit me in 1984?
How about I got Bill and Ted's phone booth that I took to today's podcast.
That works. That works. That's it. That's in my top. That might be in my top two, actually. Jim, how'd you get here today?
I'm traveling with the Time Bandits.
Oh, wow.
Back here with you.
Nice.
Okay. All right. I'm not a Time Bandits guy. I saw that movie. I started to watch that movie when I was 10 years old in the theaters. I remember being, you know what? I don't think I walked out because I was only 10. If I'd been old enough to walk out, I would have walked out. And then I watched it again as a student. It came to campus when I was at Georgia in the early 90s. And I thought, okay, all right, maybe I can handle Time Bandits a little bit. And I like Monty Python, and I like Terry Gilliam, I like all this stuff. And I couldn't get through it. Time Bandits, I know, much beloved, but it misses me. I don't know why. But you know what? If it had come out in 1984, maybe I would have liked it a little bit more. So I don't know. You a big Time Bandits guy, Jim?
I am not. No, I just didn't want to go with the obvious DeLorean. So.
Well, the DeLorean is, of course, the number one choice.
Yes.
All right, guys. So Super Bowl XVIII took place on January 22nd. This is a jam-packed week. January 20th, Defenders of the Faith album from Judas Priest came out. Just did an episode on that. It was also the night of the debut of the TV show The Master. Do either of you remember The Master?
I do. It's like a ninja show, right? Where he catches arrows and stuff.
Yes. It was the ninja show with...
I think I watched one episode and was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And I bailed pretty quick.
That Saturday, the very next day, January 21st, Johnny Weissmuller, the famous Tarzan actor and Olympic swimmer, passed away in 1984. It was the very same day that Owner of a Lonely Heart became the new number one song in the country.
Yes.
And I assume you've heard that song a time or two.
Oh, yeah. Great song.
It was also the same day that we lost Jackie Wilson, one of the great entertainers. So sad day there. Saturday Night Live. Speaking of Monty Python, Michael Palin was the host of Saturday Night Live that night on the 21st with music guest The Motels. And then we wake up the next morning. DefDave turns 13 years old at 4:05 a.m. that day. And we have Super Bowl XVIII. The Los Angeles Raiders, in their second season ever in Los Angeles, going against the Washington Redskins. Tell me, guys, Jim, I'll start with you. Do you remember this game happening? Do you have clear memories of watching this game?
I do have clear memories of watching this game. This was the first Super Bowl that I watched in its entirety. I had seen the previous two bits and pieces here and there, but this was the first one that I watched in its entirety. And so, yes, I remember it well.
Jason?
I remember this Super Bowl, yes. It was maybe 1 year before I was fully invested, but yeah. Partially because there are a couple of Oklahoma Sooners like stars on both teams. So that caught my interest as well. So
All right, I got you. So for me, January '84, it's catching me in 7th grade. I think I'm a year or two older than y'all. How old were y'all for this game?
I would have been 9.
I would have also no. You would have been 10. Oh, yeah, you would have been 10.
No, I guess I would have been 10. That's correct.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Jim.
I had just turned 10, and I know you're older than a few months older than me. So
Okay, so Jason, this has been, I guess, it's been 4th grade for you and 5th grade for Jim.
Yep.
Fourth grade is my earliest memories of being a sports fan. I think for me, 4th grade Super Bowl was the Rams and Steelers, and I think that was the last Super Bowl that I did not see at all. But I remember seeing the Sports Illustrated cover of it and stuff like that, and it was right after that. I think it was like Raiders and Eagles or something like that I started following the Super Bowl, and certainly by the time, and I remember very clearly watching the Redskins and the Dolphins play the year before in January of '83 for the '82 season, and I definitely remember this one. So what were you NFL fans at this time? I guess you were if you were watching the Super Bowl. What were your favorite teams or players that were in the league during this time? Jim?
Well, ironically enough, yeah, I got into football really big time in the 4th grade because I had gone to a new school the year before, and we would go to the library, and they had all these old football books on all the classic teams like the Packers and the Cowboys and the Vikings and the Raiders. And I had read all those. And so I became super NFL fan that year. But I guess somewhere at a secondhand store, somebody had actually picked me up a Washington Redskins coat. And since I had that coat, they became my favorite team. And they had won the Super Bowl the year before. So I was really paying attention to them in the '83 season, and to the '84 Super Bowl was really rooting hard for them.
I got you. Jason?
So culturally, I was raised a Dallas Cowboys fan, and came to embrace that a little bit later because during this time, the Cowboys were on their slide down with Tom Landry. But when Dan Marino and Mark Clayton and Mark Duper and some of those other guys with the Killer Bees and stuff in Miami, I became kind of a bandwagon Miami Dolphins fan. Dan Marino and Elway and kind of that batch of quarterbacks was really what caught my attention in 1984, really. So,
yeah, that it was '83, I guess. It was the big quarterback draft, and it was just
right. Elway,
it really,
yeah.
I feel like that '83 quarterback draft kind of had the same impact on the NFL that like Larry Bird and Magic Johnson had on the NBA in terms of just shaping the league for the rest of the decade.
For sure.
And y'all know this, I was born and raised in Georgia. So I had the misfortune of growing up as a fan of all the Atlanta sports teams in the '80s. And that was largely an exercise in misery. I think both Braves and Falcons made the playoffs like early in the decade. And then they spent the rest of the decade being at the absolute bottom of their respective leagues. But I remember early '80s, Steve Bartkowski and William Andrews. Halfback was Lynn Kane. You had the tight end was Junior Miller. And you had on defense, you had Scott Case at DB. You had Buddy Curry at linebacker. And the receivers were Alfred Jenkins and Alfred Johnson, I think. We got Billy White Shoes. Yeah, when he came over. So I was a big Falcons fan, although it was tough. It was tough for most of the '80s, I think. So just to kind of get us started, to take the suspense out of it, so the Raiders won this game. The Raiders won this game big, 38-9. The Redskins had rolled in as like the number 1 seed. I think they were like 14-2 or something like that in the regular season. They were defending champions. Redskins had like high flying offense, and this is like the height of Joe Theisman. This was the height of the Redskins, I would imagine, since they were in their second consecutive Super Bowl with Theisman at his peak. Although the Raiders would end up dominating this game. I'm going to throw some key players out here, and y'all tell me if you hear any that you want to comment on. You got any memories of watching these guys play for the Redskins? You know, you had Joe Theisman, of course. You had Art Monk and Charlie Brown, a receiver. John Riggins was the fullback. Theisman had this was his NFL MVP season. He won the MVP for the '83 season. And then over on the Raiders side, you had Jim Plunkett, who, like I said, I remember watching him play earlier in the Super Bowl against the Eagles a few years earlier. So Jim Plunkett, you have Marcus Allen. At cornerback is Lester Hayes. And you had Howie Long and Lyle Alzado on defense. There's something, I don't know about you, but just seeing those names and hearing those names takes me all the way back.
Yeah, so for me, like Marcus Allen was electric as a player, and of course he has the big 75-yard reverse. He reverses field, takes it right up the gut, and goes all the way. Which that play is amazing. But Marcus Allen had won the Heisman Trophy, so I knew him from that. He was at USC, which is kind of cool because he established a name for himself in Los Angeles before the Raiders moved to LA. Right, so they had been the Oakland Raiders, and then they moved to LA, but they actually, I think in the '83 season, they commuted they would practice in LA and play the games in Oakland. And then finally in the '83 season, they're in LA full time.
Right. Yeah. '82 was their first year.
They commuted.
Right.
And then '83, they're there full time. So the fact that Marcus Allen never played in Oakland still boggles my mind. Right. So. But so I would think I told you this, but Mike Pruitt is a former Oklahoma Sooner great, and he was like the backup running back to Marcus Allen. So
I gotcha.
I was a big fan.
I gotcha. Jim, any of these names stand out to you in particular?
Oh yeah, absolutely, all of them, really. But Joe Theisman, famous for that single bar,
single bar
that only kickers wore. I don't know why he only wore the single bar, but that was it definitely made him stand out. I believe the Redskins set the NFL record for points in a season that year, so their offense was, unbelievable. John Riggins, Hall of Famer at fullback. Art Monk and Charlie Brown. I thought it was cool that there was a receiver named after a Peanuts character.
Yeah.
And then, you mentioned Lester Hayes and then his counterpart, Mike Haynes, both of those cornerbacks, because the Redskins receivers were so good. And both of those defensive backs just shut them down in this game. And Jason mentioned, probably the most heartbreaking play of my childhood was that Marcus Allen reverse, because it was pretty much over by then anyway, but a little kid still has hope that, hey, touchdown here and a stop and then a touchdown, you're right back in the game. And it looked like they had Marcus Allen stopped, and he just reverses field and goes right up the gut for what was it, 75-ish yards or so.
Yeah, right.
And that just busted the game wide open. There were two plays that I specifically remember, that one. And then right before halftime, it was 14-3 Raiders. And Joe Theisman tried to throw a little screen pass with like 12 seconds left, and Jack Squire came in out of nowhere and intercepted it and took it back for a touchdown to make it 21-3 going into half. And by that point, it was pretty much over.
Yeah, the Raiders had they scored on special teams. They blocked a punt and covered it in the end zone. And then what you're talking about right there, the guy intercepted the quick little screen pass that you never expect a defender to be able to get to that quickly. Boom! There was like 5 yards away from the end zone, just slam dunk touchdown. And then Allen's reverse, his big run. When I see the name Lester, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say that the interesting thing to me about that little swing pass, that little pick six for 5 yards or whatever it was. So that was to Joe Washington, who is a renowned Oklahoma Sooner superstar. They had played earlier in the season. They did the same play, except I think it was the opposite side of the field. And Joe Washington took it to the house.
Yeah.
And so they were waiting for them to kind of bring that play out. And they told the defender, hey, shadow him. Do not let this thing, get on us. And then he picked it off and took it to the house. So
yeah, I was going to bring that up too, because that happened. The Raiders played the Redskins in the regular season, and it was a close game, but there were about 15 or 20 seconds left in the half, and they ran that exact same play, and Joe Washington did take it to the house. So the Raiders were waiting on that.
I would imagine that was really demoralizing for the Redskins, because they probably felt like, we've got this play in our pocket. If we ever need Joe Washington to score a big touchdown for us, we can hit him with this. We'll do it right before halftime. This will be awesome. And then it completely goes backwards on them, and that probably did a lot to crush their spirits, I would guess. I was going to mention Lester Hayes. When I hear the name Lester Hayes, well, when you hear the name Lester Hayes, what do you think? Anything particular?
Pine tar.
Yeah, the Stickum. I remember the Stickum.
Yeah.
The Stickum. He took the Stickum to an extreme. He was covered in it. I mean, yep. And I just remember images of the ball like stuck on the back of his hand and not coming off. It was hilarious. That was just before they outlawed it or whatever they did. They had it all.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think you have to call the Raiders defense the story of this game. Because, there's two stories. There's Marcus Allen, and then there's the Raiders defense, because the Redskins were flying so high. And for them to just not get off the mat in this game, you have to give the credit to the Raiders defense, I think. Do y'all have any nuggets for me? Y'all have any factoids from this game, any records that were set or anything like that? Anybody got some?
The only thing I was going to bring factoid wise, well, go ahead, Jim. You got something.
I was going to say that so this was Super Bowl XVIII. In Super Bowl XVII, John Riggins set the rushing record against the Miami Dolphins with specifically with a big run on 4th and 1 that went for a touchdown. And then the very next year, Marcus Allen breaks that record, capped off by his 75-yard run. And so that was the record. And then also the Raiders set the record for points scored in a Super Bowl as well. Up until that point, 35 had been the highest by, I think the Packers and the Steelers both got 35 in a Super Bowl. And then the Raiders scored 38 here in this one. And so they set the record for scoring as well.
The record for scoring, and I think maybe also the margin of victory. I feel like we entered an era, starting maybe with this game, of a lot of blowouts. Like, it became rare to find a good Super Bowl game that was competitive to the end. It felt like it took a long time for us to get back to that, and maybe this was the beginning of that trend. I don't know. Do y'all have any particular memory along those lines?
A lot of blowouts in the 80s. Yeah. I remember I'm kind of a tertiary fan of the Denver Broncos, and they would always manage to get there and then just get their butts kicked. So, a lot of blowouts in the, you have the 85 Bears, and that was a blowout. You have the 86 Giants. That was a blowout. So not a lot of great games. So.
Well, the other thing that happened was with the Raiders winning this would be the last AFC team to win until John Elway did it against the Packers like 14 years later in Super Bowl 32.
Yeah.
At the twilight of his career, his last two seasons, he won back-to-back Super Bowls to close out his career. And it took until the end of John Elway, class of 1983, right? That for the AFC to come back and finally win the Super Bowl again. And I was thrilled. Like, being an Atlanta Falcons guy, I was kind of raised to understand that you always pull for the NFC in the Super Bowl. And we had a long streak there, and this will be the last one that the Raiders it's the last one the AFC would get for 14 years. It's also the last one the Raiders have ever gotten to this date.
Yeah.
Like I think, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think the Raiders haven't been close except for maybe 1 year, and then they got the tuck rule against them.
They did reach the Super Bowl 02 or 03.
Yeah, they did. They got beat by the Buccaneers, I think.
And the Buccaneers won that one.
That's true. I forgot about that. But yeah, they kind of got screwed out of a trip to the Super Bowl with the tuck rule and Tom Brady.
Yes.
So it's the last time the Raiders have ever made it, and no team from Los Angeles ever made it back until 2022, when Georgia Bulldog Matthew Stafford took the Rams.
That's Jim's favorite team.
Oh, Jim loves the Rams. Okay.
No. Jim loved the Rams when they were in St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
And then
All right.
when a Missourian took them out to Los Angeles, they're dead to me.
All right. So, do y'all have anything else specific about this game that, because I want to also kind of step back and just to kind of talk about the NFL in general, but, I should say Marcus Allen, does win the MVP here. I don't know if he would go on to have a long Hall of Fame career, but this, are we going to call this his career peak? Because it's Super Bowl MVP.
That's probably his career peak. Outside, yeah. It's
certainly a signature moment, if not the peak, right? It's certainly a signature moment. That's the one everybody's going to go back to.
Yeah. He kind of, the interesting thing with Marcus Allen he was an all-pro running back, really, really great, and then had to move over for Bo Jackson for just a little bit, which was kind of an interesting time to have a backfield with Bo Jackson and Marcus Allen in kind of, 86 maybe, I think. So the only other person I wanted to talk about for just a minute would be Howie Long, great defensive tackle. But Lyle Alzado, who was half crazy defensive tackle for the Raiders, kind of well known for, double dosing the steroids during this time, and then kind of ultimately losing his life because of that. So, but he was a great player, an incredible player.
Tragic case, but also he was a lot of fun to watch.
He was.
Yeah.
And that absolute.
He got tried to box Muhammad Ali, didn't get knocked down.
Okay, so the NFL loomed large for me as a kid. Growing up in the 80s, the NFL just seemed larger than life. It seemed mythic, and there was one particular reason why it seemed to have this legendary status. And I'm going to assume that you share this experience with me, but just tell me, what kind of feelings does it stir up when you just hear me say the words NFL Films?
I love it, man. It gets me fired up. Steve Zabel and the music and the
when you got that great voiceover narration with that big orchestral score, right?
The Dallas Cowboys are rehearsing. Yeah.
And it's it was in slow motion, but it was a different kind of slow motion than what you saw on TV, and they are filming it with with their own film cameras. They're not taking it from TV broadcasts, so, and they're shooting from different angles that you're not seeing during, I don't know, that to me, it just, and of course they always put together the Super Bowl packages for every Super Bowl, give it the NFL Films treatment. And to me, that just it just blew me away. It made every single game played seem like it was just of epic proportions and importance. What do you think about NFL Films, Jim?
NFL Films is the reason why I make sure that I watch every Super Bowl now. And it's because of going back to that when they would replay those over and over and over again. And I'm telling you, I've watched each one of those Super Bowl. I can tell you almost anything about any Super Bowl because I've rewatched those more than I've rewatched Star Wars. And, I think people our age probably became bigger NFL fans because of NFL Films. And Steve Zabel had it, he did it perfectly. And they called John Facenda the voice of God because he just had that deep voice. And if I'm not mistaken, he didn't even really know anything about football. They just kind of gave him the script and told him to read it.
No way.
So it's perfection to me, NFL Films.
And I don't know who gets credit for the script writing, but my goodness, they had a way with words that just kind of would just give you goosebumps, put your hair up on end. So, I remember.
I was just going to say, when I think about those plays, those monumental plays, Marcus Allen reverses field, takes it up the gut. The Lynn Swan where he kind of tips it to himself.
And he's falling over Super Bowl X.
Roger Craig high stepping into the end zone.
Yes.
That's all. I see that as NFL films. Like I
Right.
see all those play in slow motion,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I remember in the 90s, I think it was ESPN had those. And I think this is what you're referring to, Jim's like on Super Bowl Sunday or maybe Super Bowl weekend or Super Bowl week. It was just a marathon of all the previous Super Bowls.
Yep.
The NFL Films episodes coverage of those Super Bowls, and that's really all you need. I need a DVD library. They need to package all of those. Do like the first 50 or something. I don't know, but man, they were so good, and they had such an impression, on people our age, like in the late preteen, early teen ages when watching and absorbing all this. So you mentioned John Facenda as the voice of God. Do you know which Super Bowl was the last one he did before we lost him?
Wasn't it this one?
It was this one. Yes.
Oh, no way.
Yes. 1984 gives us the final John Facenda NFL Films Super Bowl package. So,
wow.
Yeah. So I really like that. So guys, just tell me in general, like, Jim, I'll start with you. Like, how big a deal was the NFL for you? How much time did it occupy in your mind? And were you a fan of the league in general? Did you have any of the toys or the merchandise they had back in those days?
So I would say beginning with this Super Bowl kind of started with my, I don't want to say obsession with the NFL, but certainly my fandom of the NFL. Up until this point, and even somewhat after this point, it was baseball for me. Baseball was number one, and the NFL was a distant number two. But when I got into reading the books and watching the NFL films and watching more of the NFL, I really started getting into it. But, as a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid, on Sundays, you're outside playing most of the time, unless you're just obsessed with football. And at that point, I wasn't. But with that being said, merchandise, stuff like that, the NFL pencil packs that came in, the NFL helmets that you would spend for a quarter and turn the dial and it would shoot out a random one. Those, my next door neighbor introduced me to those. And after that, like I was hooked. I was fascinated. And, it was all I wanted to do.
Those pencils, how cool were the NFL pencils?
Oh yeah. Those were awesome, man.
You had to have the pencils. I would never sharpen them. I would just look at them to see the collection of names and to see the color schemes on the pencils. I don't know. It's just, and I know exactly what you're talking about, those little plastic helmets that you get in the gumball machine at Kmart or whatever. And they had the little cheap little stickers of the helmet logos right there on the side of them. Fantastic stuff. We're looking at this lunchbox here. I had this lunchbox. I feel like so many kids had this lunchbox. It just looking at this just brings back so many memories. Jason, did you have any merchandise like this? Was NFL your favorite sports league back then?
Well, I was like Jim. I was into baseball a lot, but I did love football in the fall for sure. I had some sheets, and like I would just lay in my bed and just like look at the logo. I'm like, oh, the Patriots guy. It's the guy snapping the football, and here's the stallion that is the Broncos logo, and here's the star of the Cowboys. So yeah, I was a big fan. I did have some of the merch. I did not have that lunchbox, although I want to have that so I can take it to work, this week. So
yeah. Well, I remember like the JCPenney catalog and the Sears catalog had a whole section on NFL stuff, and you probably had the bed sheets in there. I remember these jackets very well. Kind of had that Letterman style jacket with like the fake leather sleeves.
Those are pretty cool, man.
I would make those right now too.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I had the Falcons one that was red with the metallic silver sleeves, and I wore that way after I had outgrown it. I was still wearing it because I did not want to let go of that jacket. Yeah,
I think
NFL.
Axel Foley wears one of those in Beverly Hills Cop too.
That's right, of the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
I have in recent years, I've kind of fallen off of my NFL fandom. I just kind of really focus on college football. But man, in the 80s, growing up, and especially right around this time, 1984, NFL, it just absolutely just seemed larger than life. It was everything in the catalog here. It was the NFL films. I was just absorbing absolutely every bit of it. So y'all were more baseball guys. You weren't into trading cards or anything like that
I had
for
trading cards. I had football cards.
So, what like? Okay, I was gonna ask. I was gonna ask a little bit like who's like your favorite quarterback in the league or whatever. Y'all kind of already went over that a little bit. So,
I was going to say, Dave, just while you're on the subject, I remember like HBO used to have a show called Inside the NFL.
Yes.
And they would play and it would recap the week. And I used to like put in a VCR tape and record that and like rewatch it. And that's the way I took in a lot of the NFL was through highlights,
Mhm.
because you couldn't see all the games, but you could watch the recaps, and that was really cool.
Yeah, that's how we learned. That's how we learned who the players were, right? For the other teams that you might not even get to watch the game, but
Right.
at first, that's kind of how I knew who Dan Marino and Mark Duper and Mark Clayton were, and how I knew who Lester Hayes was before the Super Bowl, and
Yeah.
all that stuff. So yeah, I agree with you. And you talked about trading cards. Now I didn't have like we had baseball cards. I didn't have football cards, but what I had, and I wish I had thought to bring it up here and share it with you on camera, but because I found them and rebought them. I had these NFL sticker books, and you would open it up, and each team had like 8 or 9 players that they had color stickers for, that you would buy a pack just like you'd buy a pack of baseball cards, and then you'd go through and you'd put the stickers on the player outlines in the
Right.
book. And I've got a couple of those around here somewhere. I think Riggins is on the cover of one of them. And so, yeah, I had those, and I was absolutely fascinated with those, and I would go over the stats, and that's how I know that the Redskins set the NFL record in points and led the NFL in points in 1983, is because of because they were bolded for the points in that sticker book.
That is awesome. Yeah, you unlocked that memory just now. I had forgotten all about the sticker book, but yeah, they had the little outline of the profile, and and if you got the sticker, boom, you could turn that page. And you're like, all right, one more, almost got to fill up. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I was going to mention one other thing. One of my best friends, this is no joke, one of my best friends growing up in elementary school, we'd spend the night at each other's house all the time. His dad played offensive line for the 49ers, was an active player. So,
awesome.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah. He played with Joe Montana. It was pretty cool.
Oh man. Yeah, I speaking of Joe Montana, I was going to mention this earlier. We're talking about Marcus Allen. I didn't grow up going to NFL games. I grew up watching the Falcons, but I didn't go to any NFL games until after I was a student at Georgia, and then there was a couple of times where we'd make the trip over to Atlanta and go to a Falcons game that way. So I don't have a lot of experience going to NFL games, but it was 92 or 93 when both Marcus Allen and Joe Montana were playing for the Chiefs, and they came to Atlanta, and it might have been for a Monday night game, and I saw them play in the Georgia Dome. So that was a highlight for me, just as someone who could appreciate NFL history enough to recognize the moment that I was getting to see both those players play in person. So that was pretty cool for me.
Pretty awesome.
All right, guys, I do appreciate you coming on here and joining me as we reminisce on Super Bowl XVIII, played on January 22nd, 1984, my 13th birthday, for the 1983 NFL Championship. Before we go, do y'all have, just in general, any Super Bowl? Do you have any Super Bowl memories that stand out to you at all? That maybe when you think Super Bowl, that's the kind of moments you think of. Y'all got anything like that? I'll hit on the spot that way.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite was, I've got 3 favorites really, but the 92, 93, and 95 Dallas Cowboys Super Bowls that they capped the season with wins, but the 92 one in particular because they beat the Buffalo Bills by 194 points, and Leon Lett was headed in for another touchdown before Don Beebe stripped him from behind at the 1-inch line. And so they were going to set all sorts of records with the amount of points scored in a Super Bowl. That's my favorite Super Bowl. So
poor Leon Lett.
The next season, the very next season, the Cowboys blocked a field goal in the snow in Dallas on Thanksgiving Day, and he tried to jump on it, muffed it. The Dolphins recovered, kicked a field goal, and basically got back-to-back kicks to win the game. I was at that game.
Well, before I give you my Super Bowl standout memories, Jimmy, you got anything?
Yeah, so I've got two. One was the 49ers Bengals second Super Bowl when Joe Montana hit John Taylor with like 23 seconds left. I was actually watching that over at my best friend's house. He had just moved out of our school district like, a month before. So I wasn't going to be going to school with him anymore. So that was kind of like our our last hurrah together. And I remember being over there and both of us rooting for the 49ers, and his dad, just to be contrarian, was doing the icky shuffle and was rooting for the Bengals. And then the other one was that my St. Louis Rams, not the Los Angeles Rams, my St. Louis Rams went to the Super Bowl in 2000 for the 99 season. But in November of 99, I actually moved from St. Louis to Atlanta, and the Super Bowl that year was in Atlanta. And I ended up going to that Super Bowl and sitting in the upper deck right on the end zone line where Mike Jones made the tackle of Kevin Dyson.
What? No way.
I was gonna. That play is one of my Super Bowl memories that I was gonna mention, because that's how close Tennessee came to winning the Super Bowl. I mean, we're used to all these years of these blowout games, and here comes a game where Dyson's stretching out, and if he could just get the touchdown, and he's tackled 1 yard short with his arm stretched out for the Rams to win. That was an incredibly dramatic moment in a football game. And you're telling me you had like the perfect view of that there, right there in the stadium.
I had the perfect view of it. And the funny thing is I had no plans on going, right? I thought the tickets were going to be outrageous, but we just happened to have an ice storm that week. So I think it kind of slowed down everything. And so I just happened to call home the night before, and I was talking to my grandma, and she said, "Are you going to go to the Super Bowl tomorrow?" And I was like, "No, I can't afford the ticket. The tickets are going to be outrageous." And she goes, "No, I heard that they were going for like $500. And I was like, $500 in 2000 is a lot different than $500 now. But I was like, yeah, I can swing $500 to see my team in the Super Bowl. And sure enough, that's exactly what I got the ticket for, was $500.
That's awesome.
Wow. That is awesome. Well, the Falcons, they've been to the Super Bowl twice, but I don't want to talk about either one of those. But when I think of the Super Bowl, my mind immediately goes to the Super Bowl shuffle with the Chicago Bears in 1985. They almost went undefeated that year. The only team that beat them were the Dolphins, playing for franchise pride. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And then the Bears beat the Patriots in a blowout, Super Bowl 20. Refrigerator Perry scored a touchdown, which at the time I thought was awesome because I thought it was hilarious. Refrigerator Perry. But I would later look back on that with regret and really hate that Walter Payton never got a chance to score the Super Bowl. I think that was, in retrospect, my feelings on that play changed, because now it's like, that's pretty rotten. Payton should have had that. Had that chance.
Yeah,
for sure.
But now it's like, to this day, it's so ingrained to me that Super Bowls are blowouts. That even though it probably hasn't been that trend for a long time, still to this day, if we get a Super Bowl that's close in the fourth quarter, I'm thankful, because I was just used to these 30, 40, 50-point margins for during my impressionable years, I guess.
Yeah, I think whatever happens in your impressionable years kind of sticks with you. It's funny that you brought up the Bears Super Bowl and they lost to the Dolphins. I think the most disappointing thing about that Super Bowl was the fact that the Dolphins got upset by the Patriots in that AFC Championship game.
That's right.
Otherwise, they would have had a rematch, and I was really looking forward to that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Marino had that quick release too. He was the only person who maybe could have beaten that 85 team, and did in the regular season, but
right.
Yeah. And talking about Super Bowl memories in general, my heart also goes out to Dan Marino. I mean, one of the all-time greatest, right, to ever play. He gets to the Super Bowl his second season in the league, I think, following the 84 season.
The 84 season, that's right.
And loses to Joe Montana in Super Bowl 19. And, you're thinking, this is Dan Marino. It's just his second year. Dolphins are going to be great. We're going to see him. He's going to get his. He never made it back to the Super Bowl at all. And he spent his entire career with one team, which I totally respect. And it just makes me really sad for him. He never got that chance.
Yeah. Bummer.
Yeah. 84 was a great year for Dan Marino.
Yes, absolutely. Guys, I'm going to kick you out of here. Thank you so much for joining me. You don't have to go back to 2026. You can stay here in 1984 with me as long as you want to. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up now. Jason, Jim, thank you so much. Hey, before I go, though, we got to give you a chance to talk about your shows. Jason, tell me a little bit about the podcast and where people can find you and what y'all do there.
So I'm the co-host of the Surely You Can't Be Serious podcast, and what we do is we take a iconic movie from the 80s or 90s and albums, and we compare it to each other, and then decide which one we think is the best. And so we've been doing this for 6 seasons now, and we're starting season 7 here next March, probably. So I know on the slate we're talking about Van Halen 1984 versus Van Halen 5150. We're doing Ferris Bueller's Day Off next season. We're talking about Hotel California versus Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, 2 of the greatest albums of the 70s. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Definitely looking forward to next season.
And Jim, tell us about the Children of the 80s.
Yeah, so I am also co-host of Children of the 80s with my wife, Lindsay. We go back and revisit that decade, talking all things, whether it's movies, music, television, just memories that we have. And we have a good time. A lot of people like our banter back and forth, and then we just cover things. Well, we try to do it from a kid's perspective. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes we do it from an adult perspective, but we like to compare and contrast those 2 things as well. So
that's great. So Jason, I discovered your show at the very end of 2020, I think it was. Absolutely fell in love with it, dove right in, started blowing through all your episodes. I very quickly had listened to every one of them. I got them all under my belt. Listened to every single show y'all put out. I love everything you do. And then it was probably summer or fall of 2024. I'm on a road trip. I'm all out of Surely Can't Be Serious episodes, and I need some more 80s. I need my 80s fix, and I start searching podcasts for another 80s pop culture show, and I come across this thing called Children of the 80s, and I think they might have been doing Songs of the Summer or Songs of the Beach, and I was like, all right, as long as they don't forget about the Beach Boys, because they had stuff in the 80s, then I'm going to give these guys a shot. And they did. It was Children of the 80s. It was Jim and Lindsay, and I was like, this show is awesome. and I was thinking, and I said to myself out loud in the car while listening to the episode, I'm going to have to tell Jason about these guys. And as soon as I said that, Jim says, well, we talked to our good buddy Jason Colvin from the Surely Can't Be Serious podcast. And I'm like, what? And then I got mad. I got mad at Jason. I was like, he's been holding back on me. How come I didn't know about this show already? So honestly, y'all have my favorite. I'm a huge podcast consumer. You are the 2 that I make sure I never miss a single episode that ever comes out.
Thank you.
Really enjoy everything you're doing.
thank you.
If anybody listening, if you're listening to my show, you're probably a fan of 1980s pop culture. And if you are, you really need to know about both of these guys. Jason, Jim, thank you so much for joining me. And I know that I will have both of you back before we're done with this crazy 1984 project.
Thanks for having
Dave.
me, Dave.
Appreciate you, man.
All right. Thanks a lot. So, guys, join us next week where we will not only keep the calendar on January 22nd, but we're actually going to stay right here in the Super Bowl broadcast on CBS, because it was during, I was going to say halftime, but I believe it was actually maybe the 3rd quarter that we all witnessed a watermark moment in the history of advertising. Coming back to the show to help me discuss it is Jeff Johnson of the A Film Bite podcast. And if you're wondering why a guy who focuses on films would be brought in to talk about a TV commercial, then make sure that you tune in and find out next time on DefDave's 1984.